Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining me from today in this webinar. My name is Vita Kadile, and I'm the host of today's webinar on unique selling proposition. I'm very excited to be here, and I look forward to sharing with you some of the information that I hope you find useful on identifying your USP and communicating it to your customers in the market. In the seminar, we are going to talk about unique selling proposition from different perspectives. We will try to understand how best to identify it in different kinds of businesses, be it product or service related. And I very much hope that you can hear me and see me really well. Please check your audio whilst we're preparing to start. There is some useful tips on screen right now for you to set up. I would also highly encourage you to join our discussion and be interactive with fellow participants, with myself, with my two lovely ladies supporting me today, Mary Beth and Scarlett, who will be managing the webinar technical side and the chat function. And just a quick reminder that today's webinar, as usual, is being recorded and will be later shared with all of you registered to attend and with the 10,000 women peers that have participated today. Right, I am going to move on a little bit to explain to you what we're going to be covering today, and I hope this will be useful for most of you, if not all of you. Now, unique selling point is a very important strategic asset. Why is that the case? Because it captures attention of the customers in the market. And it creates distinction, it secures distinction among all alternatives available to the customers, in addition to your product or service. In today's webinar, we're going to define what unique selling proposition is, why is it important, why does it matter, and how can businesses identify those? What are the key steps in the process of identifying unique selling proposition? And importantly, how to put this unique selling proposition into words. What are the right words to use, how to translate it into the words and communicate it to your market. Of course, while doing all of that, we will cover a lot of different examples, which I hope you will find useful. And before we start, I wanted to ask you to share in the chat, where are you joining from today? I'm very curious to see which places we have been able to reach with our webinar. I myself am hosting it from the United Kingdom. From Wales, actually, Cardiff, and I'm looking forward to see where you are joining from. Right, okay, so we see the US, we see India, Kenya, Switzerland, lovely, Canada. This is incredible, UK as well, Philippines. Oh my goodness, I think clearly calling this webinar global is the right way. Thank you so much, Mexico, hello. Thank you very much to everyone who shared. It gives me a great overview, also for the examples I'm going to share with you and for where you are joining in terms of us to know that the content is truly interesting all around the world. So thanks again for sharing that. Right, in terms of moving on, I would also like to remind you that whilst we will be going through this webinar, we will have a bit of time for the questions at the end or some of the questions in the middle, and we will be able to look at many different things, many different examples, and I do hope you will benefit from attending today, and I do hope that you will enjoy being with me today in this short but hopefully useful webinar. I would also like to get the conversation going by asking you to put one more thing in the chat. So I imagine most of you have quite a good understanding of what a unique selling proposition is or might be. And if you don't, that's fine. That is why you're here today. So that will be the purpose of today's webinar. But in the meantime, I would like to ask you to share in the chat box, which of these 4 options could be a USP of a business? Now, multiple answers are allowed, and you can just put the numbers in, and I'll be able to see what you think could be a USP. Okay, somebody has put number 3, number 2, personalized product, again for product. Number 3, number 2 seems to be winning quite a lot. Dedicated customer service. Somebody said number 4, number 1. There's a few people mentioning all of them. Some say none. I love the diversity in the answers. Now, as some of you might have thought of. And in fact, many of you have managed to provide the answer that I was hoping for. It is all of them. So this is a very good thing to see that you are agreeing with me and hopefully figuring it out. Now, let me explain why all of those could be unique selling propositions, right? Or unique selling points. Now, fast delivery is sometimes what is putting aside your business from the competition. Perhaps you do it just much faster in terms of others. Personalized product. Perhaps there's plenty of products available in the market, but only you or a few of companies are offering personalization or customization. Dedicated customer service representative is a next level of service for whatever business you are in. And that indicates that you take seriously customer relationships, right? And you have resources to direct to address these things. Extended warranty, also something that might not be given as a default by other competitors, but is something you provide. So if any of these factors you do better than competitors, or you are the only ones doing, that can be considered as one of your unique selling points and can be part of your unique selling proposition. Now, that is very important to remember, because trying to identify USP only looking at the key marketing mix factors will always be difficult. Price, quality, and the location where the product is sold will in many cases be very similar across you and the competition. So trying to find other ways to identify and communicate USP to the customers will be crucial. And all of these little details that we will talk about, including those on the screen right now, can be quite helpful. Now, first of all, in the first part of today's webinar, we will gain an understanding of what a USP is. Why does it matter? Why should companies care about it? And what should they do about it? Interestingly enough, when we talk about USP, it's important to point that this is something that sets apart your business from thousands of other businesses in the market. And it is the distinguishing factor that makes your customers come back again, again, and again for your product or service. So let's have a look at the schematic representation of what USB actually is. Where is it located? How do you identify it? And I hope that by looking at certain zones of your offering, competitor offering, and customer requirements, you will be able to see clearer what I'm trying to share with you today. So the very first zone or the domain of operations that you care about is what customers want. I'm sure all of you are aware how important that is, and most of you, and hopefully all of you, know what your customers want and what they need, right? You need to be able to understand what their requirements are, what their preferences are, what criteria they consider when they purchase a product or a service, how the decision-making process takes place. The next element that you, again, are very familiar with is what you do well. What is your offer? What is the product that or service that you are offering doing really good? Is it something on top of the product basic features that features any augmented elements that are amazing and customers value? Is it something that you do well with the service that accompanies the product? Is it something completely different? Maybe it is the fact of how close relationships you're building with the customers, and that is what you're known for. That is what creates customer loyalty, perhaps. And then the final zone that you should be very much interested in is what competitors do well. This is where we start moving closer to the actual unique selling proposition and how to identify it for any product, any industry, in any market. Now, when we see those zones combined together, we start noticing overlaps, which is inevitable and what we expect. So this is what we really want to happen. Now, the first overlap is when competitors provide something that customers really want, but you don't. So the red zone, or so-called as a danger zone, is something that you should try to avoid when identifying your unique selling proposition. This is something that you do not want to have any words that match what competitors do much better than you, but customers also want and care about, because that puts you out straight away. In terms of the next overlap, this is the zone in the middle. That is a caution zone. Why is it a caution zone? Because this is something that both you and your competitors do really well and customers need. So this is not an impossible place to identify a USP, but this is a place of very high competition and strong clashes with your competition in the market, because they are able to do the same things you, and then identifying USP in this element will become harder because you will have to find additional things and additional elements to make it a compelling statement. Now, moving on, we have a zone at the bottom where you are doing something clearly really well, but customers don't want. So this is a zone that is not really needed to consider. This is something that consumers don't care about, so you should not worry about it. You should not invest any resources or any money into it or any time into it, because this is not something that the consumers will ever be able to appreciate. And then finally, we move to the final overlap, which is what you do particularly well and consumers really want, but competitors don't. And this green zone, or the winning zone, is what we refer to as the unique selling proposition. So it makes you unique because competitors don't do it, but selling proposition is strong in this case and can be beneficial for your business because customers actually want this. They want this from the product or from the service. That means that a unique selling proposition is a key element or feature that sets you apart of all products or services you offer from the competition. It is very important to find one for each business and be able to convey it to the customers. As I mentioned earlier, we have got a few zones here where in the winning zone, ideally, you are trying to identify your USP. You try to avoid as much as you can where possible the caution zone, because this is something that will cost quite a lot of resource and time to be able to compete with your competitors on the factors that customers really care about. And then finally, danger zone or the pointless zone is something that you should definitely avoid, as it can simply be quite risky because your competitors outperform you there, or customers simply don't care about certain characteristics that your product or service offers. All right, so for example, let's look at the restaurant business owner who knows that their key competitors have faster speed of service in the restaurant and one that is very difficult to outdo. So no matter how much resource they might spend, time and money, they won't be able to reach that level for one reason or another. So then they might want to focus on other factors that customers care about, but competitors don't necessarily offer: cozy atmosphere, spacious environment, comfortable furniture, and so on and so forth. It might sound like I'm talking about very meaningless and short, small details, but in fact, they matter a lot and they complement the whole customer experience, which is what customers really value when they make a decision to get a product or a service. Okay, let's move on and understand some differences in terminology that you might have come across similar terms before to unique selling proposition. For instance, unique selling point. So let's see together, what is the difference? Is there a difference? Unique selling or unique value proposition focuses on the value that the product or service offers to the customer through those all unique benefits and features and factors that your product and service offers. So this is a broader statement that encompasses everything that your business does better than the competition and that it is meaningful to the customers. That also means that USP can include multiple unique selling points. Annoyingly, the abbreviation is the same, and a lot of literature, a lot of resources use it interchangeably. But unique selling point is only one of the elements that can be included in your unique selling proposition statement. And it can contain multiple, as I mentioned earlier. Now, unique selling proposition is a statement that looks at conveying to your customers what they should really know about you, about your brand, about your product, or about your service, or everything that you are offering, right? So have a look at the example at the bottom, which I really like, from a plant business that basically works on curating, delivering, and caring for plants for domestic use by customers. Their selling proposition states the following: Patch, which is the name of the brand, helps you discover the best plants for your space, delivers them to your door, and helps you look after them. Now, it sounds very clear and simple and quite elegant, but interestingly enough, it also resonates with the whole offering of the company and shortly summarizes what they do. And it is very great for those cases when a unique selling proposition can match your mission statement or your general offering statement. And why is that making them unique? Perhaps they have identified that in their market, most commonly, and in their industry, most commonly competitor companies that work in the plants and the gardening area sell the plants, sell tools, provide some sort of advice on the spot, and it ends there. Whereas they not only sell plants, but they help with advice on which plants one or another customer might be getting, depending on their location, space available, and even the climate zones they live in. Also delivers those to them wherever they are, and provides guidelines on how to maintain health of their plants, all included at the same time. So this is clearly giving you something beyond the basic product, price, quality, right? It gives you a lot more, and the way this unique selling proposition is formulated uses verbs in a very smart way to show you how this particular brand actually stands out. We will have a look at a lot more examples in today's webinar. So I'm going to continue with explaining a few other bits that are important when we identify our unique selling proposition of a business. So when we identify a USP, it's important to remember that this process is typically consisting of 4 steps. So these steps help you not miss anything as part of the USP analysis, be confident in what you're trying to achieve and how to then communicate your USP statement to the target market, and also looks at some of the things that you might consider as part of this process, depending on your business, industry sector, or product category that you're serving. 4 steps to identify your USP are the following. First, it is essential to understand what are the factors that customers actually value the most. What do they want from your product or service? What do they care about? How does it address their needs or their problems are being solved by your product or service? Actually check if your product or service claims that it does that, and whether it does that in reality or not. It's very important for you to be very objective, realistic, and critical at this point in time, because you're not aiming to fool your customers. In fact, you're trying to provide a meaningful and reliable customer promise, right? So understanding what they care about, what they value, what they want is crucial starting point. The next step leads to the evaluation, which is necessary to understand how well you are doing with regard to those characteristics or factors you've identified in the previous step. This is where you need to really try and understand how to score yourself on those factors. Look at the customer reviews, read their dedicated feedback, talk to them. A lot of information sources that we will talk about later when we look at each step in detail are important in this process. Evaluate yourself and evaluate the key competitors that you identify in this step. Now, if your business competes in a very widely popular, for example, fast-moving consumer goods industry, you might not be able to identify all the competitors. It's a huge research project, isn't it? But it's important to have a look at the key market players or those competitors that are the most closest to you in terms of their offering and the key elements that are part of their proposition, so that in that case, you can be realistically comparing yourself against the competition, right? So that means a small corner grocery store is not going to compare themselves with the large chain that is prevalent across the whole region or the whole country. In the next step, it's important to select the factors that you have found as part of this process and evaluate it later on where you have scored the best. Typically, you use a 10-point or a 100-point scale or 7-point scale, whatever it is more appealing to you and works best for you. But let's say we're using a 10-point scale. So you are aiming to look at 9s and 10s if possible in this process. And you have to focus on the characteristics here that competitors either do not offer at all or score low where possible, because that way you are able then to build your unique element, your unique position, and translate it into the communications to your potential and existing customers. Finally, as part of this process, you end up understanding what are those characteristics, and you need to figure out how to put those into right words by emphasizing the strengths of your business and refining all of that proposition into a clear, concise sentence that would be your USP statement. And then deciding how that should be and could be communicated to the customers. So let's have a look at this process in more detail and again, explore a couple of examples. First step, remember, is about understanding what customers value and what they want. Talk to your customers, brainstorm with them, build relationships with them. When they come to your store, when they call you, when they interact with you online, on social media, use opportunities to ask for their feedback. Read the reviews they leave you, encourage reviews, incentivize them to leave reviews. All of these activities can help you understand what they want, what they need, what matters to them, and what they genuinely don't care about. Look at the criteria that they mention. Look at the things that they use to decide the purchase decision, to make the purchase decision, to decide which product or service they're going to buy. Naturally, in many cases, they would look at the quality and price, and that's our value for money aspect. They would also look about the availability of the product, right? The location of the product, things like packaging in some cases, or after-sales support service, and many, many other things. And whilst now I have mentioned probably those things that are relevant for most of the offers and most of the products and services, there are some aspects that go beyond basics that are extremely important, especially when you're trying to identify a USP in a highly competitive market. So looking at things that are small detail, tiny little elements that get extra value brought in to your product or service offering is important here. And we will have a look at a few examples as well shortly of how that can be done and what those characteristics could be. Now, it's also important to remember here that if you are a new business that has only started trading recently, you might not have opportunities to understand and know very well what your customers want and value because you simply haven't been with them for that long. Look at information that you can find in the online sources. Look at the industry information, look at the news, read the reviews, market data, anything that is a credible source of information that can give you the ideas about what customers really care about. In some cases, you might even have a look at the influencers in social media. What do they review? What do they talk about? And what the following of those influencers cares for. Look at the similar products in the market. Look at the similar services in the market. How have they identified their USPs? What they can share that is useful and can be used by you, not copied by you, but used by you as a source of information, right? So there's always ways to conduct even small key and low key customer research, talk to the new customers, talk to the customers that you aim to target, think about who your customers ideally are, and try to gain information from them in terms of what they expect to receive as a value from your products or services. Now, before we move on to the rest of the content and talk about this important part of identifying your USP, I believe, Mary Beth is nudging me that we have received some of the first few questions.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Dr. Vita. As we always do, we receive so many advanced questions from participants, and it'd be wonderful if we had enough time in every webinar to answer you all. But we do go through all of your questions and select the best ones that we feel are most suitable to be answered in certain points throughout the webinar. So the first question today, which came in advance, is a question from Kamal. And the question is, with similar products being offered at lower value from different businesses, how would you differentiate to create a brand so that you can charge an appropriate price for your products?
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much, Mary Beth, and thank you, Kamal, for interesting and indeed a very much hot question for many businesses and many different industries. Now, in cases where your product or service offers higher price and there are lower price competition and it's very much similar products, this is exactly the moment when you should try and go beyond the basic criteria and try to find add-on values to your products or services to be able to then stand apart from the competition. So if you've got a number of competitors that offer exactly the same product or very similar product, there must be something you should try and do differently or better, or provide extra that would set you apart. And in fact, this particular slide is going hopefully to help understand that even more, because we will talk right now about value and extra value that the products or services can offer customers to help identify, establish, and maintain their unique selling propositions, right? So a very useful resource that you can also access online if needed is the value pyramid developed by Bain and the Strategizer company that we actively use in many business domains and entrepreneurship, is the value pyramid. Now, value pyramid has 4 different groups of customer values that could be identified and could be added to your key core features of the product or services to help you be better than a competition or different to the competition. So we typically always start with the bottom group in your USP analysis, because those are much more reachable and easier added value elements. Functional value elements at the bottom of the pyramid are those that relate to product function and can actually be actively used when using the product and or service and benefiting from extra elements identified there. So for example, perhaps the way your product works reduces effort of actually making it work. If you have identified and sold in the market a heater that helps you reach temperature, warm temperature in the indoor, enclosed space easier than your competing products, this could be something that you could also promote to customers. Because a lot of the times, appliances, electronic things do require some sort of understanding of how things work. If the way you bring value to the end user is in a simplified process, that could be a functional element of value that you can use in your USP. And trust me, a lot of people will be very grateful for having that kind of opportunity. Perhaps your product reduces risk. What if the product you are selling that competes with in the market, let's say it is a razor, and a razor that is so well protected that you just are not able to create any damage for yourself. You cannot scratch anything. Perhaps the material you use in that razor is all sustainable and can be recycled, and new products can be made further from it. So there's a lot of different elements that you can dig into from the bottom of the pyramid all the way to the top and understand what values you can use if you're competing in a very highly populated, saturated market of similar product categories or service categories, right? And remember to be sure about which values could be relevant to the customers. It's important to talk to them and listen to what they're saying. Let's look at another example. For instance, a candle making business is trying to identify their USP. So maybe here, the group of emotional values could be of use. Wellness, therapeutic, aesthetic properties can be applied. Perhaps the candle utilizes the combination of essential oils that do have proven therapeutic effect or calming effect. Perhaps the holders or the tins of the candles have a special, unique artisan design that builds onto the aesthetic values and appeal. There's so many different things you can look at when you're starting to realize that the competition is very high and you need to do some more work. And as you can see, these values change from being easily achievable into much harder achievable, such as self-actualization, motivation, and much more health, well-being, and social impact related aspects. Let's move on to step 2. This is where we have identified all the characteristics we need to care about. We have found what customers truly value, truly care about, and now we need to do some scoring and evaluations. So naturally, you would start with your own business first, because you know your business, you know what you offer, and you know how your customers rate that. And you would try to be as critical, as objective as possible. It is better to underscore yourself than give too high scores, as that can resonate really bad with the promise that you will be giving to the customers if you're not fulfilling it, or if competitors are doing it better than you. So customers, remember, they always expect companies to satisfy their needs or solve their problems, not just sell products or services and provide them what they manufacture. So how good are you doing this? Are you actually solving their problems? Are you satisfying their needs? Is it something that you have already grasped in the past and you know that a train company is not selling train rides, but a train company is selling a transportation from point A to B? So try to think about broader what your business actually does for customers. This is a very good point in trying to evaluate how well you do on all those characteristics. Evaluating yourself is the first step here. And then having identified your key competitors, you would do the same for them on a number of those criteria that are crucial. And this is also what can help you understand your strengths and weaknesses, because you will see where you have certain scores and what competitors have scored on those exact same criteria. Now, might be a lengthy process and it might require quite a bit of time from you, but it is a very important part of this USP identification process, because it does give you a very strong foundation and facts that you can use, information that you can use to formulate it in a most effective way. Some of the evaluation tips I wanted to share with you is that whilst you do that, it is very useful to consult secondary data that might be available. Use the insights from your personal experience. Become the customer of your competitors. See how the service provision or the product offer is. Use it. See how it feels. Read your customer reviews. Read their customer reviews if they're publicly available, and in most cases they are. Try to be much more open-minded and alert to what happens in the environment. Look at the secondary data, as I mentioned earlier, that is relevant to your industry sector, that talks about key players in the market. Read market reports, read business news. This will help you stay ahead and understand what else you might be missing and what else is relevant and valuable. Look at the competitor promotional materials. Perhaps many of them, if not all of them, have already identified their USPs. How do those read? How do they sound? Are they overambitious? Are they realistic? Do you like any of them? Are the approaches in the way they have formulated those USPs something that you feel like you could apply? Have a look at those. And of course, be objective and critical, as I keep saying all the time, because this will be beneficial to you in the long run. Now, in the third step, you then move on to selecting their characteristics with the highest scores. So these are the elements that you do really well with regard to what customers expect and value and want. In some cases, you might even want to, if you can, put those factors, put those scores on a graph and select where your high points are. Now, this is a useful exercise for those of you who are visual thinkers, so that you'll be able to see on a sort of a map, where does your business stand and how does it mark on this perceptual map for the customers, right? How you are doing in terms of all the other different competitors that you have identified. Remember to pay attention to the strengths and weaknesses of your competitors and your own. And ideally, try to select characteristics that either competitors absolutely do not offer or do anything on, or do much lower than you in terms of the scores. Our final step is to then be sure how to communicate your USP. And to communicate it, you need to first formulate your USP statement. And you can be sure that as soon as you start to communicating and promoting it to your customers, competitors will do whatever they can to neutralize it. This is inevitable and takes place across all the industries, across all different markets around the world. For instance, if you've got the best website in the product category available that looks amazing and is absolutely stunning and user-friendly to use, competitors will bring in new web designers. They will try to rebuild their websites. They will discuss with customers what could be improved, and they will certainly put some effort and resource into getting to the level that you claim you're having. Similar can happen if you have any special product features that you have managed to incorporate. Competitors will try to explore how they can do the same. So why am I telling you this? It means that it is very important that if you've got your USP right, you need to continue to maintain it and make sure that you invest time and money to actually still give that promise to the customers. And another important factor of how that can be done in the long run and much more resonate with the customers as well is to try and see how this USP can be incorporated into other aspects of your business. What do I mean here? Here I mean your logo, your brand. Is it similar? Does your mission statement relate or offering relate to what you're saying in your USP? Is your website clearly conveying that this is what your story is about? Is it something that your brand promises, and the way your whole business is built around or your whole store looks like basically screams these elements at customers? Are you being consistent with what you're saying you're doing and can offer, and with what you in reality offering to the customers? So trying to be holistic about USP and trying to see how it can be inbuilt into your business story, into the whole narrative of why, who you are, and what you offer is essential, because then it helps you maintain it over long term with only minor tweaks here and there, depending on innovation in the market and depending on the responses of the competitors. Let's look at this simple example again to help you better understand the process that I've just gone through. Now, let's imagine that an owner of an artisan tableware store is trying to identify their USP. It might be quite overwhelming and complicated to think about how your business products or services are unique, especially in a high competition market. What complicates things in this case is the fact that the products or services provided are not of essential or survival nature, right? So having spoken to the customers and looked at the available data of the industry level and the market information, the owner then is likely to identify certain characteristics that are important for the target audience. That could be something that these customers take into consideration when they buy products sold. So we could talk about things like price, quality, the range of the tableware available, catalog if this is something that is provided, the way a website looks like and whether e-commerce is available on the website and how that works, ease of ordering both in store and online, and say speed of delivery. So this is not an exhaustive list of characteristics. This is just something I've used here for an example that could be relevant in this case. Now, having a list of this criteria, the owner then evaluates themselves on all those factors on a 10-point scale and objectively puts that the 3 elements that they do really well on is the range they provide, meaning that it's probably quite wide and there's a good selection in store. The catalog quality is very high and really serves probably as a promotional material that attracts customers and makes them at least curious and aware of the products. And the website is designed in a very, very compelling way and is particularly loved by customers or has a lot of traffic. Now, having these 3 characteristics, the owner of the store, then looks at the competition. And they're able to see that in those 3 factors, in fact, the competitors are not doing particularly well. And that is a good thing, because if you look, for instance, at the quality, company and the competition have similar scores. If you look at the ease of ordering, again, we get very similar scores. And even the top element where the price, which is an important one, it can be seen that one of the competitors is doing much better than us. So what do we do next? What would an owner do next? Knowing that those 3 factors that they have identified, range, catalog quality, and website, is something they should really build on to truly develop a unique selling proposition. For example, a good start would be something like that. Thoroughly curated, extensive collection with seamless presentation and accessibility. This is just one of the versions how you could go about incorporating into action, into concise statement, the fact that you offer a lot of different products that are carefully selected, that the catalog, hence the seamless presentation is there, is really used as a great material and customers value how informative it is. And accessibility is high because your website is scored so highly and people love visiting it, browsing it, or even ordering on it. We don't know if the e-commerce is there or not. So looking at options of how you can then incorporate all the highly scored criteria that competitors either don't offer or don't do particularly well is key. And of course, this is just one of the examples how you could do it in this case. And there's probably hundreds more available, but it's up to you to find one formulation, one particular way to say it that also is true to your heart and feels well with you and you can relate to it yourself. Because if you can, your customers will too. Things to consider whilst being involved in this process. There's a few important things to cover here. Particularly, I would really try to advise you to focus on characteristics that are very difficult to achieve and maintain in your industry sector. So this is on top of the fact that it's always useful and easier to find something that you do either much better than the competition or exclusively in the market, and competitors simply don't offer that. But in cases where this is not possible or you are not sure, it is also useful to look at the factors that you do particularly well that are generally, on average, on the whole, are harder to achieve. For instance, sustainability of materials and processes and low energy costs in manufacturing businesses. Community support in manufacturing businesses that might be harming the environment. That could also be a very short lead time for custom-made products that typically take a lot more to reach the end user. 24/7 customer service is also not something that everybody offers. So trying to think of more creative ways of building on top of the value of your core product offering or service offering is crucial here as well. Remember I mentioned about looking at secondary data, trying to keep up with industry trends, to understand what the industry is about, what are the forecasts, that is a really important one. You might even be able to be a step ahead of the customers, what they might want next year, or what they don't even know yet that they will value about this particular product or service category. And this has happened many times. This has happened before when market experts have identified that people will not be using cameras as much anymore to take photos, but actually will be using their phones. This has happened before when a lot of people have been selling certain groceries that or certain long shelf life products that actually that needed very much, and people prefer natural products, and they are happy that their expiry date will be much quicker than standing in the shelf for months and months, but at least they will get more natural products as a result. So listening to market trends and to market forecasts is important because they are written and they are generally analyzed and provided by people who know a lot about the industry and the evolution of the industry over time. Remember, I also mentioned about investing time and effort into defending and preserving your USP, and that should be done over time for as much as possible. Competitors will get aggressive in many cases. They will try to beat you at certain characteristics. You claim you are better, but it's in your hands to continue staying better and unique in that certain element. And then another thing that is important to consider is to identify some of the best ways that you can communicate your USP to the market. Would you be doing it in your promotional materials? Do you want to make sure it's incorporated throughout the whole business story, that side, your physical presence, be it a store, a salon, or a community center that you manage? Anything that you think could be used as communicating it to customers, including obviously social media and any digital channels, you should consider at this point. Because again, trying to understand what's the best way to reach them, you are the best person to know because you know your customers, you know what they want and how can they be reached. So trying to utilize that knowledge in communicating your USP is also going to be a big win for you. Now, I think this is a good moment again to take a question from Mary Beth, who I believe has something ready for us.
Hello. Yes, we've got another question, and it's from Varsha. And Varsha's asked, can the USP be flexible and pivot across time?
That is a really very lovely question, Varsha. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. Absolutely. Short answer is yes, but I'm hoping that you're expecting me to elaborate a little bit more. Why is it a yes? Understandably, we live in the world where so many things change on a very regular and frequent basis. We go through different external global shifts, be it political turbulences, pandemic, changes in technology, advancement in technology. All of that inevitably affects the businesses, whatever the industry sector we're operating in. And if your USP seems to not match what's happening currently in life and the market externally to your company and what consumers as a result would expect or need, then you are losing on USP, right? You are not using it in a way that it should be used. So trying to make sure that it stays up to date with what people actually need, or refiguring or reconfiguring certain resources that you have used before and applying those differently to develop your unique selling proposition, that would mean you will need to rephrase it as well and recommunicate it to the customers. And many businesses have done that before. In fact, we will go through an example shortly where the change has happened, and I'll explain to you why. So yes, pivoting, changing, adapting your USP when needed is certainly recommended. Now, let's move on to the next part of this webinar. Now, whilst I was going through the 4 steps of USP identification, I have used this particular USP identification worksheet that I find really useful for this analysis. Now, I have gone through the first part and the USP statement with you, but I've also added here a couple of key questions that typically business owners or marketing teams need to ask themselves when deciding and identifying the USPs. Some of the questions that you would start, and it's always good to go back to basics, is about what is the product or service you're selling? What does it entail? What does it offer to the market? What are the features or unique benefits that you are claiming you're having? Who are your target audience? This is very important because if you know your ideal customer, if you know what your ideal customer's needs and requirements are, you can formulate your USP in a language that customers will relate to and will understand and actually be incentivized to, be at least interested and inquire about your product or service. Do you solve certain problems for your customers? What are those problems? Are you able to help their life be better, make it easier? What does your product or service does especially well in comparison to your competitors? Do you run your business differently? Is it some kind of unique, traditional family way or artisan way, or in any other ways are you different to the competition? Are you perhaps supporting local communities and involving them in co-creation of your product? That could be something very unique too. Do you treat your customers differently than your competitors? And if a customer asks you directly, and this is a very crucial question, why should I buy from you? What would you say? How would you shortly answer that question? Now, importantly, all the registered attendees of today's webinar will receive this worksheet for your own peruse once the webinar has ended. So I really hope you find it useful and utilize it in the process if that's needed. Our final element of today's webinar is about putting your USP into words, which means identifying your USP statement and translating into right words that will connect with your customers and communicating it to the market. Now, putting USP into words is quite important because it is a statement that gives your current, potential future customers why they should care about you and why they should choose your offering. So the key element here to remember is that based on all that analysis we've gone through and the identification of these trends, you are then trying to convey them to your customer. So your USP should explain those benefits to the customers. Try to include all the key elements that distinguish you from the competition. There will never be too many unless you are in a completely revolutionary position. Then perhaps people know about you anyway and your USP is pretty clear. But either because you're the only one doing it or much better than others, still try to keep it concise and focus on the key unique elements that you do. And link your USP to ideal customers. If your ideal customer speaks certain language, is a certain age group, try to think how they would talk, how they would say it, what would they care about and value. And again, how can you find that out? By talking to them, by asking them these questions. Now, let's have a look at some of the very great examples here that I wanted to go through with you that demonstrate different approaches to formulating and conveying the USPs to their customers. Now, starting from the left, we have High Denim, which is the Welsh jeans company for custom-made jeans. And their USP is a very non-traditional one. It is not very concise, but it is particularly creative, and it's very different even in the way of formulating one's USP. So what they say is that we make jeans. That's it. Nothing else, no distractions, nothing to steal our focus. No kidding ourselves that we can be good at everything. So each day we'll come in and make the best jeans we know how. Now, this is quite a long version of USP, but it really speaks volumes because they are really trying to put themselves aside of perhaps all the other companies that do more than just jeans, that manufacture and sell other elements of clothing and apparel. And that way they help, this particular USP helps them stand out. On their website throughout, they have this particular USP present in their story, in their mission statement, in the description of their products. And the shorter version they use is do one thing well. So it almost sounds like a slogan, which can often be the same as a USP. Now, in the second example, which is Canva, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with and perhaps have used it, we know that Canva is a great source for design of all sorts of different promotional materials, presentations, posters, and so on and so forth. And a lot of startups and brands and companies use those. Now, interestingly enough, Canva started by Design Made Easy, which already shows that they are much more simpler to use than the competition, Adobe and Photoshop, and available for free in terms of many elements that they actually offer on their platform. Later on, Canva changed it into empowering the world to design, because later, after their successful business operations for a year or two, they started offering tutorials and manuals for paid customers to understand how to design and do things better, not just the resources to do it. So that way they started empowering their customers and still providing quite an easy ways to design, right? So in other ways, they say it on their website is Canva makes it easy to create professional designs and to share or print them. Pretty clear, straightforward, elegant, and again, speaks in terms of what their offer is. Another way of formulating your USP is a creative approach in terms of the game of words. So Bees Wrap Company that offers organic, sustainable beeswax made of wraps for food have the following USP. That's a wrap on single-use plastic. So that's quite a cool way of showing what you offer and very loudly putting a statement forward of what you are standing for in terms of company values and sustainability, and you want the customers to react to it. So this is another quite a great way to find and formulate your USP. And then the final example is about Spotify, again, hopefully well-known music platform, and specifically when it comes to their podcast creation. So they simply say that make your podcast the next big thing is the slogan. And then their unique selling point is powerful tools for beginners, pros, and everyone in between, all for free. Now, again, that pretty much sounds like they're just explaining what they're offering when it comes to podcasts. But truly, it is also what puts them aside of everybody else. It is a high quality, it is easy tools to use for all sorts of level of people who host and record podcasts, but at the same time, they're also free. And that not every competitor can offer in the market. So for these examples, you can see that either with focusing one particular thing or using creative approaches and simplicity, clarity of words, game of words can be a very successful way of identifying your USP and formulating it for customers. Now, I want to conclude this webinar with a few thoughts that I want to leave with you for your own discussion, in your companies, in your teams, in your families, friend circles, or just your business networks. Remember that a USP can be identified not just for new businesses or startups that are in the process of setting up and development, but also for businesses that have been existing for many, many years. This is not a restrictive process for only when you are starting to realize what your business could be about. This is an ongoing process, and as we had a question before, has to be revisited as the time goes by, life changes, consumer behavior changes, and the requirements change. It should always be true to your business. If it doesn't sound right when you read it or write it, if it doesn't sit well with what you feel your company offers, use another one. You have to be the representation of your USP as the founder or the company, a company decision maker. You have to be truly identified with that proposition. You need to be able to convey it and convince customers that your business actually does that. Remember that it ideally should be memorable. Easy and good formulated USPs is very easy to remember. And if you remember the USP best, then you know what kind of brand or company you're going to turn to towards the end of your decision making when you're certainly trying to find a product to satisfy your need or solve your problem if you're a consumer. Remember not to be just unique for the sake of being unique. You might be selling a chocolate drink that is the only one in the market in green color. Would the consumers care about the fact that it's the only green chocolate drink? Highly likely not. Even if that still makes you unique, it's not a valuable, unique characteristics. That is why, remember about step one, you still need to talk to customers and understand what it is that they actually value from your product or service. And as we saw in many examples, it should be something that can be as simple as just explaining what you do. Remember the example about the plant business, curating plant choice, delivering to your home, helping you care about them. It is what the company essentially does. But a nice way of formulating it is also a USP, because others don't necessarily do all those elements in that particular offering. Now, this concludes our today's webinar, and I believe, looking at the time, we do have a couple of minutes for any final questions in the chat. Mary Beth, I'm going to check in with you. How is that going?
Yes, we have had a lot of questions actually, so I'm very sorry we won't have time to go through all of them. I'm just having a look through what we've had. I think Lizzie has just asked if you can please just explain again badge value.
Sorry, could you please repeat that, Mary Beth? What value?
Badge value.
Was that from the value pyramid, I imagine?
Yes.
Right, let's have a look. Right, so in terms of looking at different values, let me just remind myself where I should probably put it back on the screen here so that other participants can also see what I'm talking about. So badge value, right? This is something very interesting. A lot of businesses actually started doing. Now, in many cases, when you buy a product or service, you want others to know what it stands for, that you are an owner. Perhaps it adds to your status, but perhaps it adds into making you feel better, letting know others what you're wearing or what you're using or what you are eating. So sometimes companies invest in creating an identifier or a badge that is not necessarily worn as a badge only, but is a logo or as a brand, can help others see what it is the product that you use or have purchased. And as a result, emotionally, you feel better because people pay attention. They ask you perhaps about this product and so on and so forth. In some cases, that could be the way logo or a brand is displayed on the product, be it a water bottle brand or a bag brand or a symbol on the salad wrapping, for example, or a salad box that you have purchased for your lunchtime. In some other cases, that could give you an extra thing that you might want to use as a customer of the service or a product. For example, you might be a member of the club of the hair salon that offers a lot of different services on top of cutting, coloring, and shaping your hair. Perhaps they run different events, different seminars, and they might issue you a card or a badge that identifies that you are a valuable member of this club, of these extra benefits that can be provided, again, on emotional level, to help you connect better with the brand. I hope that gives you an answer to your question, Lizzie. Thank you very much. Is there anything else, Mary Beth?
I think we have time for just one more.
Yeah.
I love this one because it's such a great way of wrapping up, really. Blessing has asked, does every product or service have to have a USP?
Oh, this is indeed a very interesting and challenging question that I wish had a very simple answer to it, but I will try. Now, in terms of must have a USP or not, it depends on so many factors, to be honest. Now, definitely, I would recommend a brand having a USP, because if you are trying to build a brand, if you are genuinely trying to build your presence, convey to customers what you're all about, a brand should have a broader USP of what you offer. Now it then depends on your product or service portfolio, depends on how much actually you trade, what your competition level is. If the competition is high and there's a lot of similar products in the market, USP becomes a must because it helps you generate more sales and connect better with your customers. If you are operating in fast-moving consumer goods, such as consumables that are not extremely expensive, again, you need to make sure that you do have a USP, at least in a broader sense, as a mission statement or as an offering statement, that shows your value to the customers, because otherwise they would just choose alternatives. If you are working in an environment that is about high involvement products like furniture, cars, travel offers, again, are you so unique in the market that people will already know about you and come to you? Or is there something, because you have spent a lot of resource and time and money, that you can shout about to people to make them more interested and pay attention to your offering? So I wouldn't say that the USP is necessary for every single product the company has. But in that case, if you have a wide product or service portfolio, it would be great to find a USP that includes all of them. And that way shows consistency in your customer promise. Thank you very much for this question, I think. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to conclude today's webinar with a couple of notes for you for the future. So I would really advise you here to enroll or revisit this particular online course we have in our series on fundamentals of customers and competition. It will aid you a lot in USP identification, because it talks about two key elements apart from your own company that I have covered today, and hopefully gives you better understanding of what you could do. And I believe as I'm speaking about this course now, Scarlett and Mary Beth are putting the relevant links in the chat box, so please make sure you access those. Furthermore, I would also like to announce that our next webinar in the series is promising to be very exciting. And a colleague of mine, Dr. Dionysius Ang, is going to be hosting that one, focusing on AI and its use for customer-related elements of a business. So that is promising to be something very much up to date and hopefully useful and exciting for all of you. And finally, as I'm saying goodbye and hopefully till next time to all of you, I kindly invite you to provide us with any feedback you might have and any comments you might have for today's seminar and for our series. We find it extremely valuable. There's also a link in the chat, I believe, for the feedback, or the QR code here. And we do welcome you to share everything you would like with us, and look forward to seeing you in our next sessions. Thank you very much. Take care. And I hope today was lovely for you.
Thank you, Dr. Vita. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.